We'll now take questions from the room.
Do you want it? You want?
Sure, yeah. Hopefully next year.
Give it to my son in 2 days.
Premier, yesterday you called for calm in the situation involving the lobster fishers. That doesn't seem to have happened. I just wondered, what more do you think your government can do to try to bring, to calm things down in Southwest Nova?
Well, what's required, quite frankly, is the federal minister and DFO to get to the table. There apparently seems to be ongoing conversations between the Indigenous community and the fishing community, but what's missing is DFO at the table. DFO needs to get both sides into a room to find out what is the solution. But in the meantime, all of us have to understand, and we need to respond in a way that is respecting the law. Attempting to take the law into our own hands is only going to continue to deepen wounds, deepen the distrust, and people need to understand this is a very difficult issue. There are people on all sides who believe they're right. But what we need is a federal minister to sit down with both sides in the room. It's not good enough to sit with the Indigenous community or the Traditional Fisheries Association by themselves. They all need to be in the room so they hear from each other so that they can come up with what is a workable solution.
Premier, you've been making that plea to the federal government for at least a week, if not longer now. How satisfied are you with the federal response, given...
I'm extremely disappointed, quite frankly, that we are in a position where they're not sitting at the table to find what is a workable solution. There are going to have to be difficult conversations. I think both sides know this. But we need the national government, we need DFO, the federal minister, sitting down to come up with what is a solution. This is only getting more entrenched, and people are getting more entrenched in their positions, and people are they need to be in the same room so everyone knows what each other is saying.
Given that, and you've been very clear about the need for the federal intervention and for calmer heads, still tensions are very high, as you just said. Are you satisfied with the police response? I mean, took them 2 hours to get there after 911 call at Pubnico, and they seemed by video to be overwhelmed by the people there, not in control of the situation. Are there enough police resources in the area to maintain some sort of order?
We have responded and will continue to respond to support law enforcement with the necessary manpower to do what they believe is the best approach to deliver and do their job. And we will continue to do that. Obviously, they're on the ground. The agency law enforcement needs to respond to the best way they know how, and sometimes that isn't always with huge force, but that's a decision they will make. But I will tell you that we will make available the resources required if they so need. But fisheries officers need to be on the ground as well. Fisheries officers need to be in and be in full control of this and dealing with their department. And we, as a province, will make sure that the resources are available to deal with law and order on land.
What resources can your government provide, Premier?
Well, obviously, if more people are required, we would obviously have to pick up that bill associated with that.
After Portapique, and I realize you can't speak to that, but there were allegations from some municipal councillors or county councillors in that area that the RCMP was not providing the staffing levels that they were paying for. Are you confident that the RCMP staffing along the Southwest Shore meets what's being paid for now?
So the reality of it is, at any given time, the RCMP has the ability to move members all around our province. Just because you were particularly stationed at a particular office, you can be directed and sent to any part of our province when the head of the RCMP determines that those resources are required. And that is a provision that they will do, and as again, we will make available resources if required to complement that staffing situations.
The Nova Scotia Assembly of Mi'kmaq Chiefs are calling on the province to do something. The federal Assembly of Chiefs are calling on the province to step in and do something. We know that we want the federal government to come to the table, but what is the province doing here to assure there's some peace here? This is happening in Nova Scotia, I guess. What can you do to help us get some peace here?
So we don't have any authority over the fishing industry. That's plain and simple. The only aspect that we have is licensing, buying licenses. No matter how much I want to resolve this issue, I don't have any authority to do so. That's why it's critical for the national government to be there. And it's why, in my humble opinion, the chiefs need to focus on the national government and bring the national government to the table and deal with both sides, not only the national government, but our traditional fishery and the industry that's in this province. As you know, DFO regulates our fishery. From one end to the other, they need to be at the table.
They're worried about violence escalating to potential, blood or death here. Could the provincial government do anything to declare a state of emergency or anything like that? Is there anything at your disposal that you can do to assure some peace?
We have responsibility to ensure that the appropriate level of resources is there to complement the required number of members of the force. We will, and the minister will continue to make sure that that is available. But the quickest way and the best way to reduce tension is to have the federal minister and the department at the table with both sides at the same time, and allowing those people at the table to then communicate back to their members. That will be the way that we can reduce tension and get back to some level of normalcy when it comes to what is an important part of the economy of our province.
You did COVID app, just switching gears a bit, that was obviously signed off on today. Can you tell us about why, like the timing, why now, why did it take so long?
Just the details were worked out with the national government. I don't know exactly what the delay was, but our departments were working back and forth. There was a couple of smaller details that we had to iron out, but it's out today.
And in terms of the new testing strategy that the Nova Scotia Health Authority put out today, where people who are require a negative test to travel for work or for going to a different country will require that, why there is a $250 fee? Can you explain why that strategy, I guess, is important?
Well, I mean, this has been an ongoing issue really for 7 months, but we've been dealing with ensuring that we had the capacity to deal with ensuring that we're dealing with someone who might actually have a positive case here in our province. We're confident that we have capacity now within our testing ability, so that we are now reaching out to those who want to have a test here. They can have that done at our lab with Inside. Some of them were actually doing it through private, my understanding, at a much higher cost. This has reduced that cost down for them. But we have some of our sons and daughters are teaching school in China or teaching in other places, going back for other work places outside of the country, and they need to have that test. So it was important that we made that available.
There was a tender for a project manager in the art gallery, and it was withdrawn this week because there were no viable proposals. I'll ask the ministers to get sort of into the weeds of what happened with the tender, but I was wondering, sort of on a higher level, this is a project that you've been behind personally, and I'm wondering if you have any concerns about this being further delayed.
No, I'm not. I think the department is working with them, and it would be better for the minister. But no, I mean, this will. It's certainly surprising that that they didn't find a suitable candidate. But I think working with the department, they will be able to ensure that project moves forward.
Do you expect? I'm just wanting to follow up on that. Do you expect that? You've only got about 16 weeks left on the job. Are you going to be able to be the one to announce this project and announce which design is going to take place?
I don't know if that'll be the case, and that's not. They don't need to worry about me announcing it. It'll get announced when it's ready. We made a commitment to the project, the site and all of that, but I haven't even thought about that. 16 weeks.
You mentioned that the lobster buying is in your jurisdiction. There are groups that want you to change the law to allow for buyers to be able to buy Indigenous lobster that are being caught right now. Will you do that?
We need the national government to determine what is a moderate livelihood. That will determine what we would do around those licensings. Right now, there is no definition of that. And it is our contention that those are the questions that have to be answered before we actually make any adjustment to what a buyer's license would look like in our province.
So how's going to be reconvened in the next few weeks? It's just, we're getting a little later in the fall than you have been letting it go.
No. You mean am I announcing?
Yeah,
No.
announcing that. Is there any particular reason why it's going to be later this year?
No.
You talked about WestJet yesterday, but can you just, there's a lot of people now kind of concerned about Nova Scotia being cut off a bit from the rest of the country with these layoffs. Can you talk about that?
I'm very concerned for Atlantic Canada. WestJet has been a tremendous partner for the region. Many direct flights into Europe. Our tourism numbers, these record years, have been really air access between Air Canada and WestJet, predominantly into Halifax. Our exports have been booming. Those are direct flights in and out of here that have been an important part of that. And I would say to you that without a competitive airline industry in Atlantic Canada, our climb out of post-COVID economy is going to be much harder. We have built aggressively around air access into our region for, as I said earlier, for tourism, but also for exporting our products. We had great results. And we need a competitive airline industry. I think all of us will remember what it was like when we really had one airline here. Flying from here to Sydney was costing us more than flying into Europe. So we need the national government, to be honest with you, to work with this. This is a national issue, obviously, air transportation. But I would argue, and the case I've made to the national government, quite frankly, is Atlantic Canada is going to be hit harder than any other place in Canada when it comes to if the airline industries falter. And our climb economically back will be that much greater without them.
We have Aaron Meston on the phone for Chronicle Herald. Aaron, do you have a question for the Premier?
Yep. Hi. I think my microphone is unmuted. Premier, so I guess, to go back to the moderate livelihood fishery, we've got the law not being clear in terms of what's allowed on the water right now because of the federal government. We have two communities fighting it out, essentially. And now tomorrow they're going to be selling lobster in front of Province House. The Baganagity is planning on selling moderate livelihood lobster caught in front of Province House. So then the question would be, is that legal? And if you haven't issued a license, I guess then it's not. So then, are you going to do anything about it?
Well, that's a hypothetical situation. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
Aaron, do you have a follow-up for the Premier?
Put out a press release saying that they're going to do it tomorrow. So it's not a hypothetical situation.
I think there are people who would suggest to you that not everyone agrees with that position. So we'll see what happens tomorrow.
Next, we're going to go to Mike Gorman with CBC.
Premier, back in the spring, you announced $230 million in infrastructure stimulus spending. Last month, the Transportation Department promised that we would receive an itemized list of projects related to that and how much those projects are worth. And last week, your government decided that it would not issue that list. Why won't it issue the list?
Every tender that goes out has been made public when they're received. We put out a capital plan that was released. That has all been made public when those tenders are awarded. And it'd be no different with the capital plan here. It's pretty straightforward. If it wasn't on our capital plan list and there's been a tender put for it, that would be part of our stimulus package.
Mike, do you have a follow-up?
So, Premier, do you actually believe that the most straightforward way for people in Nova Scotia to know how their tax dollars are being spent is to cross-reference 5 different capital plan lists against a tender website to try to figure out what wasn't part of the stimulus package when your government could quite simply just provide that list?
I didn't say that for Nova Scotians to do that. They're not asking me for that. What they're asking me and thanking us for is the investments we're making in their communities. Departments are busy. We're working hard to ensure that we continue to drive the economy of our province, to implement the projects that we put out there. It's been the most aggressive capital plan in the province's history. If you're looking for that information to write a story, it's there for you. We're not your research department.
Next question will go to Keith Doucette with Canadian Press.
Hi, Premier. I'd like to follow up on the back of Aaron's question. Apparently, Chief Sack and the band have actually really put out a news release asking that a sale not take place tomorrow at the Legislature. They say that it would reverse their efforts as they try to negotiate with the feds. Do you agree with the Chief's position on this?
I think all of the decisions and all the things that should take place should be at the table with DFO. I think all of these different approaches are not helpful, to be honest with you, and I would agree with the Chief's position that we need to sit down at the table with all sides, with DFO, to find that solution.
Keith, do you have a follow-up?
Are you frustrated that it appears to be there? Sides are fragmented on both sides of the issue, not in general, but there are people who seem to be working against any efforts from both sides to try to get a settlement here.
It's very frustrating, to be perfectly frank. You can understand how there are different points of view on this issue. But the longer it is allowed to go on without any meaningful dialogue amongst all the partners, it is going to get harder and harder to find a solution. That's why it is critical for everyone to get to the table now. It's overdue. DFO, Department of Fisheries, needs to get all the players at the table to find a solution now.
We'll go back to the room for two more questions. Sean?
Our Radio Canada colleagues have confirmed that the Quebec government will be giving the Q League about $12 million to help them given COVID. I just wondered, is your government planning or thinking about any sort of similar action in terms of the Q League?
No.
Why not?
Because we're of all the challenges facing our province, I don't believe the number one priority in the minds of Nova Scotians is for us to be investing in the Q League hockey. While I enjoy it, while it's an important part of our economy, like every private sector entity, there's been an impact. And they'll cope with it. The Mooseheads, the Screaming Eagles have been important parts of our economy, but I don't believe it's the role of the government to support that to that kind of income.
Have you been asked for that to WestJet?
No, I have not been asked by them. Both the owners I've actually spoken to different times. I know the minister would have. They've worked with public health to ensure that they can, have their games that are ongoing. There's how do they have fans in? Obviously, it's very different than what it was before. But neither one of them have asked us for the kind of money that is being talked about coming out of Quebec. They have been working, though, with public health to find out how can they make somewhat of a viable season. Listen, both of these teams are critical, important parts of the community, and we're going to try to support them the best way we can. But it'll always be based on the public health protocols, and I think the Q was wise when they actually created the maritime bubble here. That was a wise decision on their part, I wish them both well.
With WestJet, I'm wondering if this decision forces you and your colleagues across the Atlantic bubble to maybe rethink the bubble to encourage flight or this business sector from resuming here.
Our issue will always be public health. the safety of the citizens. I mean, at some point, we're going to have to learn to live with COVID. It's going to be here for a period of time. We've just put, on the heels of what we've seen next door, the virus has a way of exploding very quickly. I don't see the bubble being broken anytime soon. But it will be based on whether or not we believe the public health protocols are there to keep us safe. It won't be as hard as it is and as difficult as it is on our economy and on WestJet. And again, I want to go back and say they've been a tremendous partner for our government and for this region. The regional services they were providing, and on top of that, connecting us to Europe with direct flights. They're like every other company, got impacted heavily, probably more heavily than any industry when it came to COVID. And it's my hope that the national government will find a strategy to keep them viable. Because listen, we all like choice when it comes to how we're going to fly. It's kept airline prices down, tickets, and it's provided us with many options of our goods and services. So we're continuing to apply pressure. I've spoken to my colleagues here. We had a call together, and this is an important issue for all of us. We've seen some of our sister provinces are hit even harder than we were yesterday with that announcement. We are the host of the international airport on the East Coast, so some of the more regional airlines get hit, or airports get hit even harder than we did yesterday.
Has you or your office been in touch with Bernadette Jordan?
I've spoken to Bernadette. The minister's been speaking with her, I know, on all sides. I haven't spoken to her more recently, no.
That's all the time we have today for questions. Thank you, Premier. Mr. Caldwell. For this segment, I'm going to begin the question period on the phone as we have Aaron Beswick and Mike Gorman on the phone for questions for Caldwell. Is there anybody else on the phone with questions for Minister Caldwell? I'll let you know when he's here. You got what you needed. Minister Caldwell has now entered the room. We'll begin with taking questions from the phone. First, we'll go to Aaron Beswick with the Chronicle Herald. Are you there? Okay, moving on to Mike Gorman with CBC.
Minister, tomorrow a member of Sebago-Nagadee First Nation is going to be selling moderate livelihood lobster in front of Province House. The band has said that they aren't in support of that, but nevertheless it is scheduled to happen. According to Nova Scotia laws, that would be illegal is the province planning to prosecute anyone selling or buying lobster in front of Province House tomorrow?
You're asking the wrong person the question. Actually, that would be through environment. They would have to do the enforcement if there was any enforcement going to be done.
Be that as it may, Minister, given that your department regulates licenses, do you view that activity as being illegal?
The Mi'kmaq have the right, and any fisherman has a right to sell their product privately, as far as I know. So again, I'd have to get some more legal advice on that.
Going to go back to Aaron Beswick for a moment. Aaron, are you on the line? Okay, we're going to move on, Aaron. Back to you, Mike Gorman.
Minister, where are you at this point on making a decision about whether or not you will authorize buyer licenses for moderate livelihood fishing?
Well, we haven't changed the position. The position's been the same all along, and it's just not moderate livelihood. It's anybody that's buying license. They have to buy them from a licensed commercial fishery, and if they don't buy them from a licensed commercial fisherman or another buyer or another processor in the province, then they're in violation of our regulations.
And so what needs to happen then, Minister, before you would reassess your position on how moderate livelihood lobster is bought and sold?
Well, it's, again, this is, as far as the regulation is concerned, if DFO recognizes the moderate livelihood as a fishery, as they do with the commercial fisheries, and many of the Mi'kmaq have commercial fishing licenses for lobster and other species. If any of those in season want to sell them to a buyer, it's totally legitimate. If it's Mi'kmaq or anyone else that's catching products or fisheries products outside of that, they're in violation of the Act.
Just to go back to your point, Minister, about any fisherman has the right to sell to individuals. So the licenses only apply to commercial exchanges? If, let's say, one of us decides to buy lobster on outside Province House, that's not illegal?
If it's actually, the way it works is a fisherman can sell their own catch. Again, I can't answer the question on whether the Mi'kmaq can do that outside of their moderate livelihood, to individuals.
So there's a gray area, or?
It's a sort of a gray area, but again, you know, a harvester has a right to sell their product, and that's always been the case, a licensed harvester. However, a licensed buyer can only buy from a licensed harvester.
Right, and just to be clear, put a bow on this, it has to be a fisherman can sell his catch to private individuals, but it has to be in season, right?
Has to be in season, yes.
But if somebody, just like devil's advocate, if somebody buys a lobster off the back of a truck, do they have to ask the person selling them for paperwork?
They don't have to ask them, but it has to be the fisherman that sells them, or that sells them directly, that has a license.
The tensions up in Digby County have been going on for months. I'm just wondering if you or your department are playing any role in ensuring a peaceful fishery.
Well, we sure hope to be a peaceful resolution to this problem that's going on for some time. Our department doesn't do the enforcement, but our regulations are enforced by the Department of Environment, and they have the authority to do that, and I can't comment on any enforcement activities.
Looks like that's all the questions we have for Minister Caldwell today. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Minister Fury. For those on the phone, I have Mike Gorman and Keith Doucette for questions for Minister Fury. Anybody else? Minister Fury is now with us. We'll start with questions in the room.
Minister, can we get your comments on how you think the RCP responded to the recent, what recently happened in Southwest Nova?
The RCMP respond with the resources they have available to them, using different means, both direct and indirect, uniform and non-uniformed. That's the response that they've provided to date.
Are you happy with that response or satisfied?
I am. I spoke with the Assistant Commissioner late last night, the most recent discussion that we've had around resourcing. And as the Premier indicated earlier today, the RCMP under her leadership are able to utilize any portion of the provincial resources they have, and if necessary, to call on resources from outside the province.
Can you tell us why you're satisfied? Because a lot of people look at the footage and see what happened and have many questions.
It's very difficult when they're faced with the circumstances they are. I believe in one case, 200 commercial fishers and 6 uniformed police officers. They take a measured approach. They make observations, video and or photographs that support their ability to advance an investigation post-incident. They have a responsibility for public safety, and that includes their own safety, and they try and balance those priorities. At the same time, do the work they do and advance the investigations that to your point, Nova Scotians would expect.
Seeing the videos, and you mentioned there's, I think, like 6 officers there. Considering that this has been ongoing now for some time and the tensions have been increasing, don't you feel there should be more resources perhaps there so it doesn't escalate to the point it did the other day?
That's a decision that the RCMP make. They have the available resources. Their operational commanders will utilize those resources the way that they feel most suited for the circumstances. There are obviously multiple locations, various numbers of people gathered. They monitor those circumstances to the best of their ability, and as I indicated earlier, have both a uniformed and non-uniform presence. They have direct and indirect contact with both the commercial fishers group and the Aboriginal fishers. They are attempting and trying to apply a measured approach to ensure public order. At the same time, an inherent responsibility to be able to advance investigations when these circumstances present themselves. And as I indicated, the RCMP can draw on any portion of the resources within the province, and if they see a need to draw on resources from outside the province, to which the province has supported in the past and would support in the future.
Last time we spoke, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, you said that the issue of Glennison's wrongful conviction would be referred to CERT. Has it been, and have you gotten a response from them?
Yes. As I indicated previously, we had made a formal request to CERT to review the circumstances, and CERT has agreed to conduct an investigation.
Well, that's news to me. Can you give any details on that, or?
You'd have to speak to the director of CERT.
Okay, I know that you have ongoing discussions with the federal government around compensation for Mr. Ursoon. Mm-hmm. In that conversation, has the Halifax Regional Municipality been involved in discussions? After all, their police force was involved in part of the wrongful conviction.
Yeah, I'm not going to speak to the circumstances of any of the discussions we're having around compensation. These are legal discussions. legal privileges between councils, but specific to Halifax Regional Municipality, those are questions best directed to HRM.
We're going to go to the phones, Tim, and I'll come back if I have time. Going to the phones to Keith Doucette with the Canadian Press.
Yes, everybody's pretty much asked my questions about the police response, but I'm wondering, you mentioned that they're conducting a measured response to this. Is there a point where it's not so measured in terms of sending a message and that may need to be sent in terms of what's happening? Because especially if violence escalates, I mean, what has police told you? I mean, obviously they're not going to tell you exactly what they're going to do, but what generally happens in these situations, drawing on your experience as a former police officer yourself?
Well, those are questions best directed to the RCMP, but to your latter comment, I certainly understand the complexities of these types of circumstances. You would remember there had been previous fisheries disputes in southwest Nova Scotia that I was very familiar with. The police apply different strategies, uniformed and non-uniformed, direct and indirect. I'm not going to go into the details or the strategies that the police use. Their efforts are to maintain public safety. They apply a measured approach in that they engage both sides. They have liaison officers who are engaged in direct discussions with representatives of the commercial fishers group, and they have liaison officers engaged in direct discussions with the Aboriginal community leaders. Those methods contribute to their ability to manage the conflicts. Unfortunately, we see circumstances where individuals act outside of the desires of their community leadership, and the police are faced with the circumstances that we've seen on video, and I think it's critical to recognize that their primary responsibility is public safety, and that means everybody, including themselves, and they have to manage those circumstances where you have such significant numbers, where clear aggression is being utilized. And as difficult and as challenging as it is, still try to apply some measure of approach in managing those circumstances. And that's what we're seeing unfold. As I indicated earlier, I spoke with Assistant Commissioner Bergerman late last night, and we spoke about the resourcing that they have and could need or would need into the future. And I'm confident that with their training and their resources and the cooperation of all involved, that we hope to see a peaceful resolution.
Keith, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, switching gears, when we last talked to you, you said that we're waiting for the federal government to shore up a number of issues in regards to the mass shooting inquiry, and in particular, I guess, the vetting of a third commissioner. Is there any update on that front, and how soon can we maybe see some news in terms of the inquiry?
My understanding, Keith, is that they are in the final stages of that vetting process, and I'm hoping that this will be the last cabinet out that we'll have to have this discussion.
Going to Mike Gorman with CBC. Mike, do you have a question for Minister Fury?
Minister, your comments about the RCMP's measured approach notwithstanding, people had one person barricaded in a building.
Chances of engagement and conflict. They will manage those resources to the best of their ability to meet their objectives, and in those circumstances, although the videos clearly identify criminal behavior, which is simply unacceptable, their priority was public safety, and that was for those protesting and those movements were restricted by the protesters. We have to trust the judgment of our law enforcement agencies to utilize those resources to the best of their ability as they see fit given the circumstances.
Mike, do you have a follow-up?
Minister, several weeks ago, your government apologized for what it called was a justice system filled with systemic racism. What would you say to people in the First Nations community who see what happened Tuesday night and are of the view that if it were 200 First Nations people barricading a white person in a fish plant, the police response would have been dramatically different?
That's a hypothetical question and scenario, Mike, to be honest. We have an objective, a priority as government, and I as the Minister of Justice, to address systemic racism across our criminal justice system and throughout government. That's our priority. That's the work that we've embarked on, and I look forward to the continued work that our department is doing and engaging both the Aboriginal community and our African Nova Scotian community. And I look forward to the outcomes and work of the design team as they advance their mandate.
That's all the time we have today for Minister. Thank you.
Before you run out, did you hear back from the Conflict of Interest Commissioner yet?
I have, and in the process of preparing a response to him.
Mr. Chair, we didn't get a chance to report quickly. Just the families have been looking for answers all along. It's been nearly 6 months, I guess. Are you pleased with your department's effort to get the families' answers up to this point, or were you hoping to maybe see more?
We indicated from the outset that the advancing an inquiry was a more significant process. Having said that, both the provincial and the federal government have prioritized this, and as I indicated to Keith earlier, hoping this is the last cabinet out that we have to speak about it.
Up next, we have Minister Levine. I went 14 on this one.
Yeah, there's
So.
never been a time limit on that.
Hopefully not.
Good, Brian.
Okay, for Minister.
All of these now, but probably will be strung more often.
That's the way it goes.
That's right.
For the record, I would have asked for you today.
Minister, you're going ahead with or allowing a private company to come in and test for COVID, but there are restrictions. Why the need for those restrictions on that kind of testing?
First of all, the change today, I think, is a very positive one, with the price reduction for sure, but also to allow for essential workers, for students, for those who need a compassionate travel, and there is the requirement of leaving Nova Scotia COVID-free. So I think to get a test at a really cost recovery price is now what will be moving forward. The testing is still carried out by the QE2 lab. And so it does, guarantee the highest quality of testing.
I've spoken to two families this week. Both have moms who were here, have been here a lot longer than they wanted to, and want to head back to China. Under this new arrangement, given the restrictions, they may not be eligible for this $250 test. What do you say to them?
To be quite frank, I am not sure of those restrictions. Just starting to be briefed in the department, but it's certainly one that we can get back to you on. I think now I think with the current, period of time with no cases, I think we're going to be able to move testing along, get people tested in a timely manner, and those who need to leave the province will be able to do so.
Are we still helping Ontario with testing, do you know, and is that affecting our ability to do testing locally?
My understanding is that that was a very short term, and Ontario now has dramatically, in fact, up the number of testing that they are doing each and every day. And so I think right now our lab in looking after Prince Edward Island and our province, and those who are asymptomatic and need to leave the province will be able to do so, I think, in a much quicker fashion.
Sir, you spoke a bit on the day you were sworn in about the nursing home issue and trying to get more people in empty beds, vacant beds in nursing homes. I'm wondering how quick, whether that's already begun. You've had a couple days to be briefed. I'm wondering if you've been told if that's already started, if nursing homes have already responded to your deputy's letter and filled some of these beds. So
I know that correspondence went out to the nursing homes from the deputy. I have not met with him yet. He's been in Cape Breton, actually visiting nursing homes. We want nursing homes certainly to be well prepared if there are cases during possible resurgence in the province. So he is doing a tour of nursing homes, as I will as well. Very shortly, I'll get out to some of our nursing homes. My understanding is that this will be a multi-phase and multi-level approach to nursing homes, and it will be built upon in the coming weeks the plan for nursing homes, also dealing with the reports that are now into the department. So I think will be pretty short order that the deputy and I will have further information about nursing homes and making sure that we're mitigating against a possible surge in cases.
From your understanding, were the nursing homes keeping those beds vacant in an effort to prepare for another wave?
Well, in most cases, they wanted to be able to isolate patients should there be a case in the home. We now know that if you can test and isolate as quickly as possible, this again is another way of reducing spread. Also, we have, and not just Northwood, but a number of nursing homes that not only have 3, but have 4 residents using the same washroom. And so this was a way of reducing the number in some of the rooms across nursing homes in the province.
So are you comfortable this directive from your deputy isn't going to make these nursing homes less safe?
It's an area, as I said, I haven't sat, with Deputy Orrell, but what I know from my very first 5-minute conversation welcoming to the department is that he is making nursing homes one of his priorities during his time with the department, and for that reason, to see him out visiting homes, I think is a true commitment to what he wants to achieve.
But does his threat of pulling funding on beds stand?
That will be, one of the conversations next week when I meet with Dr. Orrell and the directors in the department. I'll have a lengthy session of getting up to speed on many of the files that I would have, certainly a basic knowledge of from my previous time, but there's been change. COVID, in fact, is impacting the health department and many directions that we will go in the next number of months. And so I look forward to hearing, what is taking place now and what is being seen as a way of dealing with the reports and with really what is one of my 3 priorities right off is to deal with the challenges that nursing homes have.
And do you know right now whether your department has pulled any funding for empty beds?
I couldn't say with certainty, but again, Marla in the department would be able to provide you with that information.
But you're comfortable with the intent of that letter at this point?
So I'll have to, meet with Dr. Orrell next week, and this will be certainly one of our topics of discussion.
The COVID-19 app, we recognize that's another tool to have in our fight against COVID as we live with it. But we asked the Premier logistically, I'm wondering what took it so long to come together here for the Atlantic, or in particular in Nova Scotia?
Yeah, no, there've been some areas that that they're kept coming. I guess we kept getting different reports and what would be valuable for us to have. So we waited for a few other provinces to I guess get this moving, and our Atlantic provinces now are part of the new app and the COVID alert. That can be, again, one measure. I think the measures that we have implemented here in the province under Dr. Strang and the Premier and the COVID response team, again, have done a magnificent job. And if this is one more valuable asset, then I'm pleased to see that Nova Scotians now have access to it.
Returning to the testing practice, do you have any forecasts or expectation of what kind of numbers that will do? I'm looking at capacity in the lab.
Yeah, no, this is something that I know the province has wanted to see continue to have the ability to attest big numbers. I know 1,500 to 2,000 a day are now within that capability. We've done 1,500, I know, on a few occasions. But also, too, the screening is a very, very good help as well, because we know that cold and flu symptoms have a great deal of similarity. So I believe right now for us to do that screening at 811 and then get the appropriate people testing is in fact the way we need to be.
Well, during the summer, there were some high testing days, 1,200, 1,300. They've been well below 1,000 now, and Dr. Strang has talked since early on about the potential to doing widespread testing of asymptomatic people, but it hasn't happened. Is that on the horizon?
Well, we know that as we move into fall and winter, certainly the potential for cases to occur in the province, and I think we will respond accordingly with the amount of testing that is needed. Plus, I think we'll probably see some change in testing as well. There's new developments occurring for a rapid test, and an outcome with 15 or 20 minutes. So we certainly will adapt what is beneficial for our province.
Going to the phones, we'll go to Lindsay Armstrong with All Nova Scotia.
Thank you. Minister Levine, I'd like to ask about virtual care. It came up at Tuesday's Health Committee meeting that the department is still looking at the potential unintended impacts of virtual care before making it permanent, but none of those concerns were named. I'm wondering if in your briefings you could say what those concerns are around permanent virtual care access.
All I could say at this point, and it's probably more from the experience of my Valley community and people that I have met over the past few months and during COVID in particular, that use virtual care. It was indeed a positive experience, and I'm looking forward to a detailed briefing on how the department is doing an analysis and a determination for the future. We certainly have it now until the end of this year. Medical practitioners are very, very big on virtual care, and so what deficiencies or negative consequences of virtual care, I really have not been apprised or had any kind of briefing in that area. I'm just pleased to see that what we, need to be doing, we've responded well, and there's been a huge uptake in virtual care.
Lindsay, do you have a follow-up?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, going back to the room. I have nobody else on the phone wanting questions. Gorman has unsubmitted his. Back to the room for 3 minutes.
All right. I did have another question. What the hell was
I've never seen you without a question.
I know, sorry. Because we didn't get a chance to ask you on Tuesday. Are you planning to reoffer?
Look, to be honest with you, John, I'm fortunate to be in excellent health, and that's one of the big considerations in this business, that you have the energy, the health, and I certainly am planning to do 50 to 60 hours as health minister, combined with my constituency work. That's what I normally put in. I certainly like to get out to across the province, meet with people. I've got a trip planned to Sydney to deal with seniors, and look, we have a leadership contest, going on. As you know, I'm in that neutral position of being on the leadership committee. So, there'll be some time. I know the Premier reflected pretty hard last Christmas, and we saw what happened. So the Christmas period will be my time of decision.
So you haven't decided when we're deciding? Okay. That was a long...
You are used to my long answers, John.
That seems to be all the questions we have for our Minister.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Minister Wilson.
Good Lord.
Phone. Did I miss anybody with questions for Wilson? Okay, we'll go to Mike Gorman first, and then we'll go to the room.
Minister, yesterday your government announced new protected areas. You protected everything that you had been looking at and reviewing, with the exception of one property. And so I am wondering what it is specifically about Archibald Lake that requires your department to take more time before making a decision.
Okay, thank you. So, yesterday was another great day. It sort of was a re-announcement, I guess you could say, of the announcement we made last September around those other sites where we had identified there were 10 more. So those 10 more needed a significant amount of work, not only on consultation, but also on the boundaries around them, to have some survey work done on those to make sure that the descriptions of them were proper. So we finally got to a point where we were ready to bring those forward to Cabinet. But at the same time, when we were doing consultation on them, there was an additional property, as you mentioned, the Archibald Lake one, that it was fitting at the same time we were doing our consultation on the original 10 that we would throw that one in there also for the consultation. So at this point in time, I need to review. There's certainly a few more considerations around the Archibald Lake property that it wasn't or part of the original package. It
was one that we brought in after that had certainly significant ecological implications around it. So at some point in time in the future, I will be looking at all the factors around Archibald Lake and making a decision on that.
Mike, do you have a
When I look
follow-up?
at the supporting documentation that was released yesterday, in particular the consultations report, reading the Archibald Lake section kind of suggests that you ultimately could go, a couple of different ways. You could not protect it. You could protect it as it's defined in the capacity that you are looking at it, or you could, in fact, protect an even larger swath of land. And I'm wondering if you are in a position today to definitively say whether or not you will be protecting Archibald Lake in some capacity.
Yeah, and again, in all fairness, it was put in there at a later date. There was a lot of work that I did on the original 10 as you can well imagine, there's a lot of factors that you need to look at when you bring these forward. Archibald Lake is a little further on in the process, as will be a number of other properties. As I continue, we're at 12.86%. We need to get to 13, so I'm going to start focusing on that. And so any decision right now would be a little preemptive on that perspective.
Mike, any more questions for the minister?
Yeah, is it fair to say, Minister, that you have not definitively made a decision to at least protect some portion of that? It's still on the table potentially that this land would not be protected.
I am still reviewing all the factors involved with Archibald Lake at this time, yes.
Mike, anything else?
Yeah, one more, thanks. To what degree, Minister, is where you stand on this being influenced by the level of support from members of the public to leave it untouched in the interest of economic development for the mine?
That's a great question, because I think anytime we bring a protected area to the forefront to make considerations on it, there's always some kind of an economic impact to it, be it on a resource based around the forest industry or the mining industry, or there's access issues around them. So, it's always trying to find that balance, and in that, consultation plays a very important part. It's a role for all Nova Scotians, and that's what we did here during our consultation, was the voice of all Nova Scotians. So in all fairness, I think, I've been very open to listening and ensuring that when a decision is made, it takes into considerations that I hear from the whole spectrum in regards to that.
Okay, going to the room. Sean, I think you have a question?
You can thank your colleague, Mr. Caldwell, for this, because he punted it to you. Enforcement of lobster licenses apparently is your department. There's a native or indigenous Mi'kmaq fisher who plans to sell outside Province House. Will your enforcement be there?
So I was just made aware of that. Certainly our enforcement people are involved. They work very closely with DFO. And at this point in time, it would be a little bit preliminary for me to make any comments on whether what actions would be taken.
Would it be considered illegal sales?
Again, I'm not going to speculate on that at this point in time.
Some of the percentage of protected areas, I know 13% is the stated goal of the government, but once you get to that, do you expect that'll be the final amount that is protected in Nova Scotia, or will a new goal likely be created? Is your department already sort of looking beyond that now that you're getting close to the finish line?
So there's sort of two parts to that answer. One is my mandate. I've been mandated to get to 13%, and clearly, I'm working hard. The next 0.14%, even though it seems a small amount, is it's the closer you get or the more you close in on your goal, the tougher the decisions are going to be. So for me, my mandate is only to 13%. What I think is important also for us to understand is that the federal government has brought forward a different counting system that we're required to follow, that follows their new guidelines. And this is a national guideline that they have, where nationally they feel that 17%. But the criteria under that is different. So I don't want to cloud the two up. My mandate is very clear to the 13% under the current guidelines that we have to follow. And I'm working very hard towards that, and hopefully to bring some next steps forward.
And sorry, to bring some next steps forward, you mean to get to
Towards getting to the 13%, yeah. Yeah.
Just wondering if the tensions at the fishery up in Digby County, we were seeing, sabotage of traps, boats set on fire, and then lobsters being contaminated or destroyed. I'm just wondering, are you or is your department looking to get involved in a way, or are you currently involved to maybe get some peace here or ensure, the destruction of the environment?
Yeah, well, I guess maybe the best way I'd like to speak to that is I am the MLA for Clare Digby. And I will tell you that it's very concerning for me of how this has impacted my community. It's a very difficult situation. And my utmost concerns have been from the very start is around violence and the concerns that I've heard from both sides, and I really cannot echo that enough. And that, I think, is to the, what I hear more on the streets than anything. So my job is to ensure that people get real information at real time. I'm there to support my community, to try and ask the appropriate people to provide the resources that are needed to provide to ensure that our community is safe. And I think it's been very clear from the Premier what our position is there. And I just really would ask all those out there to please let's start talking, and let's stop the violence, because that does not solve anything. It really doesn't.
Given you are the guy on boots on the ground there, how do you feel about the response by the authorities?
In what?
How do you feel about the way the RCMP handled themselves?
Well, again, those aren't comments that are mine. Those, I think, you'll obviously have asked the Minister of Justice and the Premier on those, and I'd leave it to them to answer that question.
Yeah, but you're the guy who represents that area.
And obviously, I've had concerns, and I brought those concerns forward, and I've asked them to act on those. I mean, originally, early on, we didn't have enough people on the water to help out. We do have now the Coast Guard there, and we do have supports there. So, it's my role to try and keep what's current and what's real on the ground relayed to the appropriate people at the right time, so we get the responses.
That's all the time we have for Minister Bilson. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.